The road to Persepolis was paved with dust and memory. Alexander had conquered Babylon and Susa, the jewel cities of the Persian world, but one prize still remained: Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, home to the palaces of Darius and Xerxes, stood as a proud reminder of Persian greatness. For generations, its golden halls had been the heart of the empire that once sought to enslave Greece. For Alexander, Persepolis was not just another city, it was justice long delayed. The march toward Persepolis began in the cold months of 330 BCE. The Persians who still resisted had fled. There, hoping to make their last stand among its walls, rumors spread that immense treasures were hidden in the royal vaults, guarded by soldiers and loyal satraps who would rather die than surrender their sacred city. As Alexander's army approached, the landscape changed. The road wound through narrow passes, steep cliffs rising on either side. The Persians had set fire to the countryside, hoping to slow the Macedonian advance. Yet, nothing could stop them. Alexander led from the front as always, his bronze armor flashing like a signal of destiny in the pale sun. The defenders of Persepolis, under Ariobarzanes, a Persian general loyal to Darius, blocked the famous Persian Gates, a narrow mountain pass that served as the final approach to the city. It was here that Alexander faced one of his greatest challenges since Gaugamela. The Persians knew the terrain, and the pass was easy to defend, but impossible to attack head-on. Arrows rained down from the cliffs, rolling boulders crushed entire units. For days, Alexander's forces were pinned down, unable to advance. But he was not a man who accepted defeat. He sent scouts to search the mountains and learned of a hidden path that local shepherds used to move their flocks. Guided by a captured native, Alexander led a force of elite soldiers on a daring night march through the darkness. Yet by dawn, Alexander and his men had emerged behind the Persian defenses. The Persians, caught between two fronts, were overwhelmed. The Macedonians attacked with fury, cutting through the defenders until none remained standing. Ariobarzanes fought bravely but fell beneath a hail of spears. The Persian gates had been taken. The path to Persepolis was open. When Alexander stood upon the ridge overlooking the city, the sight before him stole even his breath. Persepolis shimmered in the sunlight, a city of palaces, terraces, and towering columns that seemed to touch the sky. The golden roofs of the royal halls gleamed like fire. It was not merely a city, it was a monument to Persian pride and centuries of power. Alexander knew what it meant to take Persepolis. This was not just another conquest. It was the symbolic destruction of the empire that had once invaded Greece. He ordered the army forward. The gates were breached, and after a brief resistance, the defenders were crushed. As his troops entered, they found the wealth of Persia piled high: gold, silver, jeweled thrones, silks, and tapestries that had belonged to kings for generations. The royal treasury was so vast that it took thousands of camels and mules to carry it away. The Macedonians could hardly believe their eyes. Some fell to their knees in awe, others laughed and wept, unable to comprehend the fortune they now possessed. But amid the splendor, there was darkness. Many Persians fled, and those who resisted were slaughtered. The once great city trembled beneath the boots of foreign soldiers. Alexander ordered that no sacred temples be destroyed, but his men, drunk on victory and vengeance, looted freely. For days, the streets echoed with shouts, music, and cries. When Alexander finally entered the royal palace, he stood before the great stairways carved with scenes of Persian kings receiving tribute. From all corners of the empire, each figure, etched in stone, bowed before the mighty ruler, a vision of the world as Persia once imagined it. Now, the young Macedonians stood where Darius and Xerxes had once ruled. The world had turned. Inside the throne room, Alexander ascended the royal dais and sat upon the golden throne of Persia. The moment was heavy with history. His men cheered, shouting that the revenge of Greece was complete. For Alexander, it was more than victory. It was destiny fulfilled. Days later, a strange event would mark Persepolis forever. One night, Alexander and his companions held a great feast in the palace. There was music, wine, and laughter. Among the guests was Thais, a beautiful Athenian courtesan and companion of Ptolemy. As the night deepened and the wine flowed, Thais stood and raised her cup. She spoke of Athens, of how the Persians had burned her city when Xerxes invaded Greece a century earlier. "Shall we not repay them," she said, "and burn the city that once ruled over us?" Her words struck the heart of the drunken soldiers. The hall roared with approval. Alexander, caught in the intoxication of the moment, rose and shouted for torches. Led by Thais, they marched through the palace corridors, laughter echoing in the night. Flames licked the wooden beams, feeding on centuries of glory. The fire spread quickly, consuming the royal halls and the treasures of Persia. The night sky turned red. The flames of Persepolis lit the mountains for miles. As dawn broke, the city still burned. The air was thick with smoke and ash. What had once been the pride of an empire was now a ruin of blackened stone. The scent of burnt cedar and gold filled the air. Many of Alexander's men watched in silence, realizing that they had destroyed something magnificent. When the wine wore off, Alexander himself stood before the smoking ruins, regret in his eyes. He knew the act had gone beyond vengeance. It had been destruction for its own sake. Later, he would claim it was done to avenge Greece. But in his heart, he knew it was the result of pride and passion. From that day on, Persepolis became a symbol, not of victory, but of how easily greatness can burn. Alexander ordered that the rest of the city be spared, and the people who remained were treated kindly. He had learned that fire could conquer, but it could not rule. In the ruins of Persepolis, Alexander found the royal treasures of the Achaemenid kings, so immense that it took months to transport them back to Susa and Babylon. Historians say it was the richest plunder ever taken in history. Yet no gold could rebuild what had been lost. With the fall of Persepolis, the Persian Empire was effectively dead. Darius III fled eastward with the remnants of his court, pursued relentlessly by Alexander. The conqueror had achieved vengeance for Greece, but his eyes were already on a greater prize. He sought not only to avenge the past, but to rule the future. As his army marched away from the smoldering ruins, Alexander looked back one last time. Smoke curled into the pale sky, rising like a ghost from the ashes of empire. He had come as a warrior, but he would leave as a ruler. Persepolis had burned, but from its ashes, a new world would rise, a world united under one king. And yet, somewhere deep in his soul, Alexander knew that he too would burn brightly and briefly, like the city he destroyed. For no flame, no matter how glorious, can burn forever.